Welcome to another edition of the Pro Tradecraft Career Toolbox, where we help you turn your day job into a career. My name is Don Fernando, and today I am speaking with the extraordinary Myron Ferguson, who turned the drudgery of drywall into high art. I bet you don't like that characterization of drywall, do you, Myron? Welcome to the show.
Well, the word drudgery bothers me a little bit, but it is kind of a repetitive trade to be in, and it's heavy and dusty work. So maybe there's a little drudgery there, but yeah.
I think it's probably more drudgery if you don't know how to do it, like me.
Right.
When I'm dealing with drywall, I suffer.
People quite often say it's like art because they like watching me do it because it looks easy. I can make it look easy. That's what I enjoy about it, when people compliment how easy I make it and how nice it looks when I'm done.
Sure, because more than knowledge, it's kind of a body knowledge, if you will, a muscle memory on how to do it, and years of practice to make it look that easy. A little bit like an athletic skill.
Yeah. I think you're right because I've gotten pretty good at it, and I hope very good at it. But I remember years ago, you just said something about athletics. I'm like, I would come home, and when I had two boys and they liked the Chicago Bulls, right? I'd come home and I'm like, well, I had a Michael Jordan day. Everything I did came out smooth and perfect, because maybe I'm not Michael Jordan, but sometimes I feel like that at work, which is a good feeling.
So let's consider drywall for a second. It's an evolution of what, doing just a little bit research, I discover is a 9,000-year-old art form that used to cover ancient walls in Rome and in Egypt, sometimes just for wall surfaces like we use drywall, other times for ornamentation. Of course, I'm speaking about plaster. Have you done any plaster work? How do you see drywall in relationship to this rich historical tradition and the evolution from plaster to drywall?
Well, I think plaster is a better finish. I mean, it's more solid, and I live in a pretty historic town. A lot of the homes are plaster. And if I'm doing work in those homes, they don't really want me coming in there and replacing the plaster or going over the top of the plaster with drywall. So yes, I have done some plaster work out of necessity. Well, it takes a lot of skill. I don't know about the higher level, but because I've done drywall for so long, I've developed the skills. And I suppose if I did plaster more often, I would develop those skills as well.
And what about why did we replace plaster if drywall is not quite as good a material?
Well, after World War II, when there was a housing boom, houses were going up like crazy, and they really needed to get it done faster. So some people think, well, why would drywall be faster? You've got, when you come into plaster something, basically you put the base coat on, the next day the finish coat, and you're done. But with drywall, it dried faster, and you were able to put your paint finishes on it sooner. And that's why it kind of got the name drywall. It kind of took over. I think back in the day, plaster didn't take the drywall seriously enough. And I think they kind of missed the boat. They should have really been pushing more of their product and accepted drywall as part of their trade as well. And I don't think plaster would have disappeared. It didn't disappear, but I don't think it would have taken the back seat to drywall the way it did.
Now, I've watched you evolve your work, reading your articles in magazines, your books, your many YouTube videos. I'd like to know a little bit about your career and how you use drywall to create not just smooth walls, also sculptural type installations where you've layered drywall on the wall to create either faux woodwork type finishes or some actual artistic installations. I think saw an article about you doing, I think it was a kid's bedroom, and it had some really pretty three-dimensional layering done onto the wall. You've evolved quite a career that isn't just simply making walls smooth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Drywall quite often is done by the square foot, and so you got to work really fast to make money. And I didn't really love that type of atmosphere, So I wanted to evolve into more specialized customers, customers that appreciated quality rather than just getting it done as fast as possible. And then also, while I'm on the job site, I want to stay there. I'm there with my tools, my employees. I want to do whatever I can. So we started introducing like tray ceilings and different layers. I've done wainscoting, and I did a Hollywood scene on somebody's wall once. all with different layers of drywall and different colors of paint. And that's how I started making money without having to rush through everything. I would be on the job site and the customers wanted something a little extra and they trusted me to do that. And I even got into colored plaster finishes. And then a few years ago, because drywall is part of the wall assembly and ceiling assembly, I even got into, creating more airtight drywall and everything that went with that. So my business has really evolved from doing the track homes, which is what I originally started doing, where we were finishing one house every week, to maybe not doing bigger houses, but doing more high-end homes that they wanted the little extras.
You're also quite the video producer and writer. You've got a lot of published work on drywall, magazine articles, books, and I've seen your demonstrations at the trade shows. Now, do you teach? Do you have an apprenticeship type program, even informally, where you pass some of this knowledge and wisdom on to younger folk?
I do, but I wish I did a lot more of it. That's kind of like how I see myself for the rest of my career, is doing more and more of that. But I don't have anything formal other than, my videos and my book and stuff. But I do occasionally get a call. They're like, hey, we've got a crew and we're getting more into the drywall business. Would you come to our site and bring your tools and show us how to use them? I've got a job right here in town coming up soon. There's a couple of young guys. I met them the other day. I think they're in their 20s. They're full of enthusiasm. So their boss wants me to work with them on the next drywall. Whenever I do any sort of training, trade shows or talks or articles, I always really emphasize how much I love the building trade and how it is a great career. I was telling you earlier that I'm the fourth generation building contractor in my family. I'm the only drywall contractor in my family. And I have 3 children and they're all in the building trades. None of them really get their hands too dirty though. They're more into construction management type stuff. But I think they got into that because they worked with me when they were younger. And they're better at their jobs because they have hands-on knowledge of how things go together in the field. Mm-hmm. But no, really, it's training people, particularly young people, to be in the building trades and show them my enthusiasm for it is what I really tried. I mean, that's how I got to be that drywall guy. I remember one day I came home and I was talking to my wife. I was complaining. I'm like, oh, the employees did this and this happened. And she said to me, well, if you don't like what you do, why are you doing it? I'm like, what do you mean? I love it. She's like, well, you should hear yourself. You're complaining. So I decided from that day on, I was only going to say good things. And so it's that mentality when you're always positive. Next thing you know, everybody thinks I love drywall work. And now I've got myself convinced that I love drywall work. And it became a little bit contagious. And so maybe I'm crazy, but I love drywall work and I love the building trades. So there you go.
That is fantastic. That's really, really inspiring. I noticed that you're doing a lot of other things. For example, you have a line of wall surfaces that you call Fresco Harmony. Tell us about this venture.
It's actually not my product. You would ask me that. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. But anyway, he's from New Mexico. And I met him a few years ago, and he's got some great products. And at the time, I was looking for a decorative colored plaster that was really easy to apply, which I'm like, well, that doesn't exist. But I met him, and it's a colored plaster, but it's not really plaster. It's a color you add to joint compound. Now you're able to create something very similar to the Venetian plasters, only in my opinion, a much easier application method. So I don't live in New Mexico, so that type of finish isn't as popular here, but it's really starting to catch on. I mean, if I were to give you a tour of my house, I could show you 2 or 3 nice ceilings that I've done with that.
Well, I've looked at the website. It has some really beautiful stuff. I mean, just gorgeous, the colors. And you're right, it looks a little bit like a clay wall, if you will.
Right, yeah, it's nice. I was teasing my wife. I'm like, if I was single, this entire house would be covered with Fresco Harmony. And she's like, well, I like it, but I don't like it that much. Yeah. So it's a matter of taste. There's a lot of nice products out there that are coming up all the time, and it's certainly worth looking into. I mean, a few years ago, I did a bunch of stuff with American clay plaster. that really took off for me as well around here. I did a bunch of really nice stuff with that. But that's, in my opinion, a little harder to work with and not quite as durable of a finish. But it's still nice. So, it depends on the customer.
Yes, I have some experience with that. It's supposed to clean the air, that clay, but you're right, it's a little bit susceptible to scratches and kids running by. And
Yeah, right.
now, how does drywall fit into high-performance building? You mentioned this a few minutes ago.
Drywall is along your exterior air barrier. All your exterior walls and all your ceilings are drywall. So why not try to make that your interior air barrier by making it more airtight, by gluing it and foaming and sealing around all the outlets and things. So it plays an integral part. And I got into it a few years ago because I was building a new house for myself and I wanted to build a certified green home.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time I became a green home verifier and I learned about how important it is to have an air barrier. And everybody concentrates a lot on the exterior air barriers. But any little flaw in that exterior air barrier is a flaw. And so it's kind of like a belt and suspender type thing. If you do a great job outside, why not do a great job on the inside as well? Particularly with a house that has a vented attic. So that just led to another thing for me to do. Another thing I could offer my customers. I'm like, you have to pass this blower door test to get your CO. I'm going to help you pass it by doing a really high quality airtight drywall job for you. So that just added another little thing to my business plan.
To your quiver. Now, you do actually offer that service, though, the blower door testing and such. Is that just to kind of complement what you're doing and verify that it has worked, or do you actually offer it as an energy rater or a blower door tester?
Yeah, I just do the blower door testing for multiple contractors in the area. Even if I don't do the drywall or insulation work there, they need to have it done in order to get their CO.
Right.
So, and I do consulting on that as well, because when this first came into effect, even though the contractors were given plenty of notice that this was going to happen, they were failing. They could not pass this blower door test because they just didn't take it seriously enough. So I did consulting where I would help them. I would do all these inspections and even some air sealing for them, and then do the blower door test during the process a couple times to see how it was going. So that's what I do that for. It's a nice little extra income where I don't have to lift heavy stuff. So that's what I'm looking for at this point in my life as well, too.
That's nice. That's just for those that may not know. What is a blower door test?
Well, a blower door test is something we do to test how tight the house is, how many air exchanges you have under natural conditions. What I do is I depressurize the house. And based on all these calculations and the cubic feet of space in there, I can tell you how many air exchanges you have per hour under natural conditions. And that's important.
What the leakage level is.
How leaky is your house? And a lot of people they're like, oh, I want it to be leaky, let it breathe. But when your house is breathing, when you haven't done anything to air seal or control where it's coming in and out, you're bringing in and out contaminated air, you're bringing moist air into your wall and ceiling cavities. You want to control that. And you also want to have lower energy bills. That's the key thing here. You want to have a nice, healthy home that is, all your air exchanges are under controlled ventilation, and it's a healthier home. And, oh my gosh, the last house I lived in had 3,400 square feet of living space. And my energy bills, and I heated a 2-car garage, my energy bills are only $3,000 a year. And we kept it comfortable. And I didn't even install air conditioning. We just didn't need it. And I did the same thing with my brother's house out in Colorado. I'm like, Kevin, if you listen to me, because he's like, oh, everybody in the development's got icicles down to the ground. I'm like, if you listen to me, you're going to have no icicles, and you probably won't need air conditioning. I went to visit him a year later, walked in. I'm like, oh, you did get air conditioning? He's like, no, it's just naturally cool in here. And he's like, all the neighbors are envious of him.
Sure.
So, yes, he had to spend some money on things that you can't see, which is a problem. Like everybody wants this quartz countertop because they can see it. They want the beautiful hardwood floor. They don't care about the insulation until they get their first energy bill. Then they're like, oh, I wish we spent more money on that. So these are things that I've tried to convince people all the time. It is important and done for our own health and safety as well,
The operating system of the house. What you were referring to with the icicles is the heat escaping through the ceiling into the attic and causing the melting on the roof, because you're actually heating your roof surface in the middle of winter, which is probably not where you want to put your energy dollars. So you're talking about sealing that all off so that the heat stays within the house, and then you don't get the icicles.
Right, but you still need to have an air exchange system because you're living in this house. You're creating humidity. You're creating fumes when you cook and things like that. So you still need to have a controlled air exchange, which is a hard concept for some people to understand. I have an air exchange system in my basement, and there's actually a way for me to shut that off if I wanted to. And that's always my fear. We build these really airtight homes, and now the homeowner can shut that off. But the key to it is don't have the shut-off switch in a real obvious place, and buy a quality system that's very quiet. Like, I don't even know mine is on until I walk down into my utility room with my ear against the unit. Then I know it's on. So it's not like I constantly hear this and think, oh man, all this energy I'm using by that little motor running. That's irrelevant. Health and safety, that doesn't use a lot of electricity either. So
yeah, and a heat exchanger is just essentially a fan that draws outdoor air in and exhausts indoor air, but in a controlled way. The key word that you said was control, so that that air is dehumidified, it's pre-warmed or cooled depending on the season, and it's a controlled thing rather than arbitrary just leaking from wherever. And a lot of people think the house needs to breathe.
Because the pressure in your house is constantly changing. Like as soon as I turn on my bathroom fan, it's becoming a negative pressure. And it's really windy against my house. It's doing the opposite. So it's constantly changing. So air is constantly wanting to come in or out of your home. And we want that to come in and out of your home in a controlled, healthy way. Like, I have exhaust ports in the bathrooms and in the kitchen area here and in my foyer, which is near the attached garage. And then I have fresh air coming in to the bedrooms. And I have one fresh air in the living room here and in my main hallway. So fresh air where you need it and exhaust. And it was simple. I actually installed it myself. And it was a lot of pipes and because it's got to be balanced to it, but it works really well. Yeah.
Now look how far we've come from drywall all the way to healthy and to indoor air. The relationships that you've created with this simple material.
Yeah, I've evolved. Like, you didn't ask this question, but let me start it for you. I remember when I first went into the business, I didn't have any money, and I wanted to go into construction business. I was working for my grandfather. So I'm like, well, I'm going to the drywall business. And I've been doing stuff for him. So basically, I had a bucket with some tools. Mm-hmm. Screw gun, a couple of trowels, and knives, right? And when I do demonstrations, I'll hold up those tools and I'll tell people, I can tape any drywall job you give me with this bucket of tools. But I have these tools that I use. Yeah, so the tools have really evolved, but they're not new. Actually, the inventor of the automatic tools was Ames Tools, and I don't know, I bet you that was 50 years ago that they came up with these tools. But, they are kind of expensive. The example I give when I tell people that I use these tools and that, my investment is $4,000, right? Mm-hmm. And when I was in my 20s, I could tape 6,000 square feet of drywall in a day. Mm-hmm. But that was by myself, and it was a hard day, a 10-hour day. I bought these tools, and suddenly I can tape 9,000 square feet by myself in a day and be home by 4 o'clock. It was a no-brainer. They paid for themselves. Plus, I believe the quality, it's easier to achieve the higher quality. When I have new employees, they are more productive at the taping a lot faster than we were hand taping. Mm-hmm. So the tools have evolved. Taping tools. And we got the screw guns with the collated screws. And I didn't even use a drywall router when I first started. I just used a keyhole saw. Although I think routers were around, but I was probably too cheap to buy one. And now even the materials. We have 54-inch high drywall for your 9-foot walls. So higher quality. If you're using 48-inch high on 9-foot walls, you double the linear footage of seams that you need to tape. So, and the longer links. I know people laugh sometimes because I'll order 16-foot long pieces of drywall. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, how do you even lift it? Well, I have help. I'm not attempting to do it myself. But it's higher quality because people expect high quality. They're not happy. The expectations are super high. Mm-hmm. for me at least. And where I live in upstate New York, we don't do any texturing. Everything is smooth wall. There's no knockdowns, there's no hand trowel finishes, it's all smooth. So the expectations are super high. So we have to try to meet those expectations and all these tools and different compounds and things and using the proper longer lengths of drywall and things like that, they help me to achieve that. Because what I always tell people is, okay, the expectations are really high. I can't ask the customer to lower their expectations. I have to try my best to meet them, but be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was at a job doing some consulting recently where they were having trouble with the finish. The customer just wasn't happy. I did a walkthrough and it was lots of windows in this house and some high walls and just sun and light just shooting across all these walls. You could also walk and look as you're walking from room to room, you're looking right down these walls so you could see all the little imperfections. And I think the drywall job was actually pretty good. It could have been a little better, but it was because of the lighting and the construction of the house that it was difficult to achieve something that made the customer really happy. There was things that they could have, now in hindsight, there's things that I think they'll do next time differently, maybe even warn the customer ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a tough thing. And it's funny because I even said to him, well, I don't know, I live in a new house and I think I can only find maybe 5 things that I don't like in my drywall work. And then the other day I'm in my little coffee bar over here, and for that 2 minutes in the morning, the sun was shining through that little window against that wall where I have an outside corner, and I could see defects in my taping.
Mm.
And that's the only time of day I would see that. And what it was just an edge that was not feathered in perfectly or just a slight difference in the texture of the surfaces, and I could see it. With plaster, getting back to the plaster, you don't really have those different textures or porosities that you have when you deal with drywall work.
Mm.
But that being said, plaster is not a perfectly smooth surface either. It has a lot of trowel movement and tool movement in it, which adds to the beauty of it, in my opinion. But with these houses, with all these high walls and light shining, it can be pretty difficult to hide.
We've also gotten used to factory finishes like automobile finishes and forget that a house is a product made by hand.
Right. The last person you want to actually do drywall work is somebody who paints cars. Back in the day, they used to fix all the dents. They put that Bondo and stuff on it, and then they would get it perfect. Well, those customers would expect the same thing out of drywall work. But that being said, you got to go with the proper paint finishes too. I always recommend what kind of paint you should put on the ceilings and the walls when I leave. And I even suggest that maybe letting me prime first. And that way I can do my walkthrough after I prime and fix any little imperfections.
Oh, I see. Because you can see it after it's been primed, whereas when it's just the drywall raw finish, it's a little bit harder to spot some of the potential defects.
Right, because the dust is filled or you're tired and you didn't see that little scratch that it's going to show through as soon as you put some primer on it.
Now, we're talking here about respecting quality, achieving quality, taking pride in quality, and we've gone through your whole career. Do you have any general advice in closing for people get into the trades, usually make some quick money, just like you did with a small set of tools, don't really understand that they have a whole lifetime ahead of them, and that first step with maybe a hammer or a trowel could actually be the first step into a lifelong career? Do you have any parting advice for our aspiring tradesmen on how to turn any trade really into something quite fulfilling and purposeful that provides a good living as well?
Well, what I think is important is I specialized in something. I didn't want to become, I know a lot of people, like my son-in-law, for example, he wants to be a general contractor, so he's doing a little bit of everything. And I specialized in just mostly the drywall. I've evolved, of course, but so I got really good at that one thing. As a result, my estimating was easier because I knew exactly what I was getting into and how much material was going to cost, how much time I think it was going to take. So specializing is important, and because I mostly just in the drywall business, I got this big network of contractors that I worked for, so I had steady work coming in, and I didn't really have to worry about who was going to hire me next. And they appreciated my attention to the detail. I think that's what I would suggest. Like, if you're going to be a roofing contractor, be a roofing contractor. Get really good at that one thing. And of course, it branches out into little different things, just how I did. But to start out, like I've often said, a few years ago, I really got into sound control because that's part of drywall as well. And like, I think it would have been a acoustical engineer if I had to start over. And there again, I'm talking about specializing in one little thing. And I talked to my kids about that, but none of them wanted to do that. But so anyways, that's what I think I would suggest to people.
Focus, get very good, and then life take you.
Yeah, try to relax. Have other hobbies too. I have a lot of other hobbies that I really enjoy.
Thank you so much, Myron. Your experience, your wisdom, and your approach to the life and to the trades is really inspiring. So really appreciate your time, and I'm sure that all of the listeners have appreciated your words of wisdom and will likely put them into practice. So thank you so much for being with us here today.
I hope so. No, I really appreciate it. I enjoy doing this kind of stuff. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.